Welcome back to the wrap, Kyle. Good morning.
Or
Hot off the press, MIT did a study, the Gen AI divide, state of AI in business in 2025. The headline that's kind of, or data point that's grabbing all the headlines right now, 95% of Gen AI projects are failing. A lot of ways to kind of define failing there for sure, but with that high of a number, right, this is directionally accurate, right? A lot of projects failing. Um, you know, you're the chairman for the Center of Excellence for an AI, Center of Excellence in a publicly traded company. What's going on? What do you think?
yeah, I guess I'm not surprised by this.
Mm.
In a lot of the companies that we've worked with or seen, or just the market buzz, right? I think this was almost obvious that it was coming. As with every kind of hype cycle, it's have you actually earned the right to take advantage of this technology? Have you positioned yourself,
Mm.
over the last several years, or did you read you know, some fancy article from Gartner or see a TikTok or a YouTube video, and now all of a sudden you want to take advantage of a technology that you haven't prepared for or invested in your processes, right? And so it's like, yeah, of course they failed. You don't know what to do with it. Like this is a whiz bang technology, but everything in my kind of my humble yet correct opinion goes back to brilliance at the basics. No matter what technology comes about, it forever and always, as far as I can see out into the future, will come back to brilliance at the basics, and that there's no technology that sweeps that under the rug. It just amplifies it. And so if you have bad data, you have bad processes, like you're just going to fail faster and louder. That's it. Like it's not actually going to make it better. If you have good processes and you have good data, like, yes, this is a very, very extraordinary technology that can absolutely amplify businesses. But that's where you see this massive divide between companies that are reporting, huge transformations and large, levels of success. And then what is actually the vast majority of the market that can't get an AI project out of the pilot stage. And it's, again, to me, it's less about the technology and more about some of the foundational pieces that are inputs to being able to. And this was the same thing with cloud, right? If you were really bad and had bad practices in your data center, moving that into the cloud didn't make it better. It actually made it worse. And a lot of that's where all that like repatriation kind of nonsense came from, was people couldn't and didn't know how to adopt or adapt to that technology because they didn't have the foundations right. So
Hot take there. Hot and aggressive take, which is probably the best way to deliver a hot take is aggressively,
yeah,
um, with a lot of conviction. But I mean, what's going on here? Like, what you're saying is kind of obvious, right? I mean, I think it applies across a lot of areas. And even if you just like take it out of the technology context, right? Um, you know, this concept of kind of mastering the basics, being strong foundationally, at something, kind of gives you a right to kind of get to that next level. What do you think is going on, either psychologically here, or maybe your answer will be rooted in technology? But what do you think is going on that's kind of leading people to think that they can kind of skip levels here?
yeah. I mean, this is true in business as it is true in our personal lives. People look for instant gratification. They look for shortcuts, because discipline is hard.
Mm.
Discipline and foundations are hard. That's why few people do it, right? I mean, that's why the greats are the greats and not and aren't everybody. It's because those things are actually really hard. It takes time. It takes, it's doing those things the right way consistently over a period of time, because that's where, you talk about like, oh, that person's lucky. Well, what is luck? It's, where opportunity meets preparation. Well, that preparation is that years and years of discipline, and then opportunity, something like this new technology comes around. It's not. I think I put it out was the people that are benefiting from AI aren't the ones that are trying to adopt it the fastest. It's the ones that have been preparing for it the longest.
Mm. Yeah, even if they didn't know what they were preparing for specifically, I mean, it's the foundations of strong governance, appropriate levels of security, well-structured data, solid processes. I mean, it's all of those things, that even without the advent of AI, benefited an IT organization. All right, benefited a business, made the IT organization powerful for the business.
Well, and you just think about it, right? If for a company that had well-defined processes, and I think I want to be careful in how people hear the word process and they think bureaucracy and red tape, and actually, like, good process is the exact opposite. Good process should empower faster decision making and more autonomy versus less. If your processes require slow decisions and less autonomy and delegation to decision makers throughout your organization, you have bad process. And so, but if you have good process and it's well defined and it is, people are able to do it through kind of human labor, well, the next logical step, I mean, even when we were building out some of our reporting structures, where we started was in an Excel spreadsheet, right? Because it's the easy, it's kind of the quickest, the easiest, the most malleable way to kind of throw something together, figure out what we needed, solidify what that process was, what the data that we needed to actually capture was, how we were going to report on it, and then over time we leveled up into other more robust technologies that automated those things away. But we had to be able to answer the questions first. Otherwise, like, you're just getting a really expensive noise machine. And so, if all of a sudden, you're saying like, oh, I'm going to use AI to automate. It's like, automate what? Like, do you actually does your organization actually know its process and its decision-making, framework or criteria and how you make decisions? If you don't, then, like, AI doesn't help you. I think one of the other things is, and I'll at the risk of sounding blasphemous, not every problem is an AI problem. Right? Like, AI is a tool in the toolbox the same way any other thing was. And so I think right now what we're seeing is this hammer in search of a nail, where people are looking at it and saying like, oh, well, it's AI this, AI that, AI this. And it's like, well, what is AI actually really good at and what is it not good at? And so, what we have are, the difference between deterministic frameworks and probabilistic frameworks. And we're getting in a place where some of this is blended in the news level, right? When you hear about agentic AI, people are thinking that the AI is actually going and doing a bunch of things. But when you actually pull open the hood and see what actually happens at the engine, it's like, well, no, like the LLM is still an LLM, but it has access to tools which use a deterministic framework, which are via APIs and RPAs and things of that nature. And so you still need those deterministic processes that say, it's an if this, then that type of branch, but then layer an orchestration of AI that can say, okay, which process do I need to, enact, but then that process becomes deterministic. And so, again, it's more of the right solution for the right problem, is another kind of key piece. I think is we're still in this noise period. Ton of capital coming in, a lot of startups. It's the buzzword of everything. But I think it's not, I guess I want to make sure I'm not saying don't adopt AI. If anything, I'm saying, hey, you need to move fast, or with a sense of purpose, a sense of urgency. Because the other thing is, like, moving fast doesn't always mean moving forward. And I think that's something that people get confused. They're like, we're just going to move fast. It's like, okay. But if you're not moving forward, then you're not really accomplishing anything. You're just a circus. So
yeah, but what are the things to move fast on? I mean, I think that's probably worth discussing, right? I mean, your premise is, hey, if you haven't been doing the foundational elements, like, you don't have a right to be successful in AI. You're obviously going to end up on the 95% side of this equation here, where you want to be on that 5%. You got ground to make up. It's not by immediately running into the arms of, OpenAI or wherever, or just, hey, we're just going to deploy Copilot and all of a sudden we're doing AI, right? Like, that's not it. That's a quick way to drive your IT budget up, potentially expose yourself to some risk, and not actually cover ground while patting yourself on the back and saying, hey, we did it, right? Where failure is right around the corner. Look, I don't want to say take a step back, but how do you start making progress on those foundations, right? How do you earn the right to AI?
Yeah. So I think, instead of, and maybe it's just, nitpicky on words, right? But instead of categorizing as, hey, we need to move fast, we want to move with a sense of purpose, and a sense of urgency. But that purpose is key, right? Like we're not just running blindly, but we identify, okay, where are the pieces that we aren't there yet? But maybe it's our process, maybe it's some of our technology adoption, maybe it's our capabilities that we even, do we even know how to take advantage of this? What are those things? And then move with a sense of urgency to actually get in a position, right? Like start defining those processes, making sure that, do we have good data? Is it tagged, appropriately? Because if people are worried about the security of your data, it's like, well, do you have data tagging? Because like if you don't actually have your data tagged in a way to identify what is sensitive data versus not sensitive data across your databases, then like what are you talking about? You're not even there yet. Go do that. So there's basic kind of steps, and now for each business it's going to be a little bit different. But I think you gotta take a hard look and say, like, have we earned the right? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yeah, I think that last piece there. I mean, I think that's a really a call for kind of patience and maturity, right? I think there's a lot of stuff that's getting caught up in the market. I'll I'll use kind of a random example. Sometimes we end up doing this around here where we talk about working out sometimes, right? Kind of the foundations there, and when I left the army, I got a little bit out of shape, right? And I didn't want to go back to the gym anymore because I remembered who I was, right? Like how much I was deadlifting, how fast I could run, all that sort of stuff. And the reality is I was not that person anymore, right? I had to go back and start building for this long term with this long term view, where all of a sudden I wasn't working out and running to go to war. I was doing it to be a dad and live here and be able to play with my grandkids 20 years from now, 30 years from now, however long it is. And so kind of that longevity and that purpose and that really that call for kind of patience and maturity and laying down the foundational elements. This technology is not going away. There's a massive amount of hype right now. It is easy to feel like you're getting caught up in missing out. The reality is 95% of companies are failing at this anyways. Like,
Yeah.
do the foundational work so that when you are doing these POCs, when you are doing these pilots, when you are finding these discrete use cases, like, you're doing it right, because over time that is what's going to lead to these larger these larger projects being successful.
100%. We actually just talked about this on our last podcast in maybe a slightly different context, but it was, you have to recognize the realities on the ground, of where you are at today. And I'll even kind of use another example around land navigation. And so for those that don't know, but you think about, I mean, this is how a GPS works. This is how a map would work. In order to get to a destination, one of the key inputs to know how to get to a destination is knowing where your current position is. You cannot navigate to a future destination without knowing your current position. And so like that is because the route changes, right? Like whether I'm over here or whether I'm over there, my route changes based off of where I am at. And so my journey would change. What I need to do changes. And so without recognizing that as a company and saying, hey, let's take a hard look in the mirror. Where are we at in this journey? It's all just kind of wishful thinking and noise, and it doesn't actually help to move the organization. In fact, I feel like what I've seen or experienced with companies is that the more they focus on that kind of FOMO and believing that they're still the special operations buff person, and in a way upset that they're not that person anymore. Like, it doesn't help, right? Like, being upset about what you're not isn't helpful to getting to where you want to be.
It literally kept me out of the gym, right? Like, I was embarrassed because I just didn't acknowledge where I was at, right? And so the problem compounded.
Yeah, exactly. You're 100% right. It actually keeps you from getting started on your journey by, focusing on the thing that you're not, versus acknowledge where you're at, figure out where you want to go and, put one foot in front of the other and then do it.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe just kind of bringing it to a close here. Look, you haven't earned your right to be successful in AI, but that doesn't mean that you can't. And you can start doing, the activities, the basic foundational activities that you need to today. The very first one is, looking yourself in the mirror, right? Either at an individual leadership level or at an IT organization level or at a business, organization level, and saying, we haven't, but we can, and here's kind of what we need to do. So, I know you have a ton of passion around this topic. Love to see it come through. And that's a wrap.